Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down really big ideas. And today, we are tackling an absolute giant from the world of physics and, philosophy itself. So, you hear this question all the time, right? Will AI eventually become so smart that it treats us like we treat ants? Well, physicist David Deutsch has a fascinating and honestly pretty counterintuitive answer to that. He basically argues that artificial general intelligences, or AGIs, won't be fundamentally smarter or more capable than we are. And his reason is kind of simple. Any hardware advantage they have, like way faster processing or a bigger memory, is something we can, in theory, just bolt on to ourselves. So the playing field, it's actually level. Okay, so let's really dive into this. We're going to start with his main argument about AI. Then we'll look at a couple of challenges to his idea, and finally, we'll see how this all connects to this much, much bigger vision he has for the future of humanity. All right, first up, let's get to the core of it. This idea that human intelligence isn't just one type of intelligence. No, he thinks it's a kind of universal computer, where the only limits are resources, not the kind of thinking it can do.
So the whole thing really hangs on this one concept. Deutsch sees the human brain as Turing complete. Now, that's a powerful idea. It basically means our minds are like a universal operating system that can run any program you throw at it. The only real limitations are things like processing speed and memory, physical stuff. It's not that we have some built-in wall that stops us from understanding certain concepts. This means creativity, consciousness. It's not magic. It's all just computation that our universal hardware can handle. And this sets up a really crucial distinction.
Which brings us right to the next key point. See, Deutsch frames this whole debate as a split between our hardware and our software.
And this is where the whole thing gets reframed in a super interesting way. For Deutsch, our hardware is just the wetware, the brain itself, its raw speed and memory. But everything else, science, art, culture, your personal choices, that's all software. And here's the kicker. Software can be learned, it can be copied, and it can be improved. The implications here are just massive. It suggests that education isn't just about cramming facts into your head. It's about installing better and better software on that universal hardware we all have.
Okay, but this brings up a huge question, right? If we've all got the same fundamental hardware, then why aren't we all geniuses at quantum mechanics or writing symphonies? Why did these huge gaps in ability exist?
Let's just take a real-world example. Some studies show that about a quarter of adults in the U.S. have a literacy level so low they can't do simple things like find an expiration date on a license. Is this a difference in their basic hardware?
Well, according to Deutsch, the answer is a hard no, at least for the vast majority of people. He'd say this is a software problem. It's not a faulty brain, it's a gap in knowledge, in culture, in motivation. He argues that just like you can learn French, these same people could learn the culture of literacy and logic. It's all learnable software. But what about the twin studies? Identical twins who were raised in totally different families still end up with incredibly similar IQs. That seems to scream that there's a genetic or hardware component, right? Well, Deutsch is still skeptical. He says, look, correlation doesn't prove causation. He throws out the idea that maybe there's some unmeasured factor, maybe something as simple as their appearance, that causes their adoptive parents to treat them in similar ways. And that would be a software effect that just looks like hardware.
Okay, so the next big challenge to this all-or-nothing view of intelligence doesn't come from humans. It actually comes from the animal kingdom.
I want you to picture a cat trying to open a door. It sees the handle, it forms a little theory about how it works, and then it comes up with a totally new strategy, like jumping off a nearby counter that it's never seen before. It guesses and it tests. Come on, isn't that a form of creativity?
Deutsch would say no. He argues that this is just a ridiculously sophisticated genetic program running, a kind of built-in instinctual knowledge. It's not true explanatory creativity because the cat can't tell you why its strategy works. It can act out a complex story, but it can't tell you one.
So now that we've seen how he handles those challenges, let's zoom out a bit and see how this idea of universal intelligence fits into Deutsch's much, much bigger philosophy.
This right here is the heart of his entire worldview, something he calls the beginning of infinity. It's this powerful conviction that there are no fundamental limits to human progress. because our creativity lets us go on this open-ended, literally infinite journey of creating new knowledge and solving problems. Now, this super optimistic view flies right in the face of a pretty common fear about existential risk. The philosopher Nick Bostrom has this metaphor. He says scientific discovery is like pulling balls out of a big jar. Most of them are white. They're good, beneficial discoveries. But what if there's one black ball in there, a discovery so dangerous it just ends us?
But Deutsch's response just flips this whole idea on its head. He thinks every single piece of new knowledge, every white ball we pull out, is a potential solution. For instance, discovering how to build safer labs actually protects us from the danger of creating some superbug. So in his view, knowledge itself is the very thing that removes the black balls from the jar.
So finally, how do we take these huge ideas and actually apply them to our own lives? Well, Deutsch offers a surprisingly practical, even if it's a little unconventional, guide for how to make progress.
He calls it the Fun Criterion. And look, this isn't about pleasure or just having a good time. It's about a state of deep harmony where your explicit knowledge, like that new diet plan you're on, isn't at war with your gut feeling that something about it is just wrong. Real progress, he says, happens when all those systems are working together. Think of it this way. This kind of fun is a powerful tool for correcting your mistakes. If what you're doing feels like a total grind, if it doesn't have that harmonious quality, that's a signal. It's a sign that there's a conflict in your knowledge, a flaw in your theory about what's good for you, and it needs to be fixed.
And this is exactly why he is so deeply suspicious of rigid long-term goals. He thinks if you make all your daily actions serve some goal that's 50 years away, you completely shut down that near-term, fun-based error correction that tells you when you're on the wrong track. You won't find out your grand theory of life was wrong until it's way too late.
He takes this so far, he actually thinks giving direct advice to someone is kind of immoral, like you're asserting authority over them. Instead of telling people what to do, he believes you should just offer them better arguments and then let them use their own creativity, their own error correction to figure it out for themselves.
So, in the end, Deutsch's whole argument really turns the question back on us. The ultimate limit isn't out there in some future AI silicon chip. It's right here in our own software. If our potential is genuinely infinite, limited only by the knowledge we decide to create, then the real question isn't what will AI become? It's what will we choose to become next?